Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. And welcome back. I hope your rest was amazing. And I hope that your week is coming to a nice, beautiful close and you're ready for a beautiful weekend ahead because today is one of the best days. It is a Friday. We made it through another very busy week, but we're not done yet. We got a bunch of business to attend to today and some good news. We got Trump knocking on the door of the Supreme Court. Quick preview, then we'll zoom in. We're going to SCOTUS again. I know we've been there a couple times before, but we just got to do it. We got to get there until they finally do something with themselves because they have a judicial branch to run. So we're going to go through this case. This is the deportation case, the Alien Enemies Act case that we've been talking about here a long time out of Judge Boasberg's courtroom, the same judge who conveniently got assigned the Signal case as well. So his case is now up on appeal. He just extended the TRO saying Trump can't deport the terrorists, the Tren de Aragua terrorists who came into the country without some sort of a judicial hearing in front of a judge and all this stuff. And our position has long been, well, if some bureaucrat gave America the due process of just, checking boxes and importing them via an app or just allowing them to come across illegally, then they should get the same amount of due process on the way out. And we'll talk about this with the Supreme Court. We'll see what they said because they dropped this big filing in today that we'll go through and see what is inside. Trump reacted to this and to Judge Boasberg in particular. Elon and the Doge crew were talking about the judges, and Trump was talking about MS-13 today at the White House. So we got clips of that all coming up. Then we're turning our attention to the Court of Appeals, also out of D.C. We've had some adverse rulings here, but this was a good one for the president. This woman called Kathy A. Harris, she sued, she got fired, and then she's like, you can't fire me. I'm a civil servant. So she sued, and she just lost this one. So Trump filed for a stay, and it got granted today by the Court of Appeals. So we'll go through that, read through what the decision was, and then hear from Alina Habba, who just got sworn in New Jersey as the U.S. Attorney today in the Oval Office. Good news for Alina. We've also got updates from Fani, and you may have missed this one, but we've talked a lot about Fani and her noxious odor. And so when I saw this headline, it made perfect sense. There was a full hazmat response near Fani's office. Unbelievable. She must have just left the courthouse or something. So full hazmat response. So we'll go through that story. Now, there was a hearing earlier this week where the Georgia Senate committee was pushing for a subpoena enforcement of Big Fani. And Fani, we saw last week, is still palling around with Nathan. And so, lots going on over there. But Fani came out and she was talking with Atlanta Journal News. And she says, if I get subpoenaed to come in there, you're not going to like it. So we'll see what's happening there. But yeah, hazmats to noxious odor land in Fannyville. So we'll come back to that one. But it's a beautiful day, my friends. And I hope your week was amazing. We had a great members only stream this morning. We'd love it if you became a member to support our work, meet other amazing watchers out there. We have the best community ever. And it is even better as a member. So we have member streams in the morning. We had a great stream this morning. We'll be doing a Saturday members only stream tomorrow, and we don't want you to miss it. So come join us. Go to watchingthewatchers.locals.com or click on YouTube, click join, and we'll see you tomorrow. And we appreciate that. So, all right, now let's get to business on the day, my friends, because we've got some good stuff to get to, starting with the Supreme Court. Jumping in. Trump back at the Supreme Court, and this is a big one. This is the deportation case of the Tren de Aragua gangbangers that were trying to get out of our country until all the ACLU gangbanger lover lawyers filed a lawsuit and said, we want them back here. So the Judge Boasberg, ordered that the airplanes get turned around in the air. Trump, of course, did not do that because they had already left U.S. airspace and we're out. He's not going to bring back terrorists into the country. What kind of country do we think we're running here? So what has happened is the judge has started an inquiry and an investigation and has said you cannot continue to deport people based on the Alien Enemies Act and stop it. And the TRO has just been extended by Judge Boasberg. A lot of people pointing to his conflicts with his wife having an abortion clinic and his daughter working for or getting money from NGOs, working for nonprofits. Lots of questions about it. And the judge conveniently also got another signal case assigned to him. But that's not this case. This is the deportation case. And we are now in the Supreme Court of the United States. And we have seen Judge Amy Coney Barrett and Judge Roberts time and again. We've been here knocking on the door saying, can you please do something about this and get your judiciary in order? John Roberts comes out and scolds Trump and says, hey, how about you don't talk so badly about our judges? Judge Roberts, how about you get your judges in order? It's not that complicated. They're co-equal branches. The Congress, if they want to impeach the hell out of every judge, they have that right. And the executive branch, if they want to criticize and condemn these judges and argue for Congress to enact impeachments or removals, they can do that too. And John Roberts should get his house in order. So we'll see if he acts now, but they are knocking on the door again. And this is just an application by Trump to vacate Judge Boasberg's orders so that they can continue to deport alien enemies of America. But the judge doesn't want him to do it. So they're knocking on the door of the Supreme Court. They say, hey, guess what? All right, 9 judges, the highest court of the land, who've thus far been pretty dang quiet on all of this. They say, all right, guys, we're back again. And we respectfully file to vacate the orders of Judge Boasberg. Now, this case presents fundamental questions about who decides how to conduct sensitive national security operations in this country. Who runs it? Does the president run it through Article 2 of the Constitution? Or does the judiciary run national security ops through their TROs? I don't know. It's confusing, apparently, for a lot of people out there. But here is what the Constitution says. It gives us a clear answer. The president does. The Republic of America cannot afford a different choice. Now, on February 6, 2025, we rewind the clock, the Secretary of State, it's Rubio, named Tren de Aragua, TDA, a designated foreign terrorist organization and a specially designated global terrorist group. Now, that designation reflected President Trump's recognition of the acute danger that Tren presents to our national security. And the president has since determined that thousands of members of this designated foreign terrorist org have illegally infiltrated the country in furtherance of the Maduro regime's goal of destabilizing democratic nations, including the United States. Now, President Trump acted swiftly and tasked his administration with neutralizing Tren. Upon finding that TDA is undertaking hostile actions to engage and conduct irregular warfare against the United States, both directly and indirectly, the president invoked Article 2 powers and his authorities under the Alien Enemies Act, which has long authorized summary removal of enemy aliens who are engaged in invasions or predatory incursions of the United States. Now, after making these findings, the president designated them accordingly and subjected them to removal. And so to protect the country against these gang members engaged in a campaign of terror, murder, kidnapping, and other things, the administration detained designated Tren de Aragua members identified through a rigorous process. Here's what they tell us. The government prepared to immediately remove them by plane to El Salvador, which had agreed to detain these foreign terrorists after extensive negotiations. Shout out to Bukele. In the president's judgment, swift removal of the TDA members was imperative to prevent them from endangering personnel and detainees in U.S. detention facilities and continuing to infiltrate U.S. communities. The United States thus has an overwhelming interest in removing these foreign actors whom the president has identified in engaging in irregular warfare and hostile actions against the United States. Now, on Saturday, March 15th, just about 2 weeks ago, that marked the culmination of weeks of work by President Trump and his cabinet. They identified foreign enemies within our borders. They invoked a long-standing statutory scheme to combat them, and then negotiated and planned a sensitive national security operation in conjunction with a foreign country to remove them. Now, as with many sensitive diplomatic and national security ops, speed was of the essence. That's why we delegate this to a presidency. That's why we have an executive branch for this stuff. You don't want Congress to try to form a committee to solve this problem. That's not what it's designed for. Same reason we don't have the judges do this stuff. They're not designed for that. An executive functions like an executive. Now the judges are trying to muck it up. Yet even before the proclamation's public issuance, before Trump even told it to America, the district court, Judge Boasberg, halted the imminent removal of 5 plaintiffs who were a party to this lawsuit without even hearing from the government. Trump says, there's a national security risk, they have to go. Judge says, overruled. Literally. Without even hearing from the government. Hours later, Judge Boasberg enjoined all further removals under the proclamation, said, your proclamation's invalid. Trump says, I'm invoking it based on statutory law. Judge says, no, you're not. I'm the president now. Says, then he certified a class of gangbangers, okay? Literally, all non-citizens in U.S. custody who were subject to the proclamation and its implementation. So Trump comes out, says, Tren de Aragua gangbangers are Tren de Aragua gangbangers, and we're going to do something about them. Judge says, no, you're not. They're a class of individuals, just like mesothelioma patients. That order is forcing the United States to harbor individuals whom national security officials have already identified as members of a foreign terrorist organization bent upon grievously harming Americans. Those orders from the judge, which are likely to extend additional weeks, and he just did that like minutes ago, extended it another 14 days. Surprise! Whoa. Says now jeopardize sensitive diplomatic negotiations and delicate national security ops, which were designed to extirpate TDA's presence in our country before the invasion and the incursion continues. The government, Trump, sought immediate relief from the DC Circuit, which took the extraordinary step of hearing argument within days and issued 93 pages of opinions. Now, a majority of the DC Circuit held that the orders, though styled as TROs, are appealable. And that majority further agreed that the government, Trump, faces irretrievable injury because the district court's order stopping further removals risks scuttling delicate international negotiations during critical junctures, saying that there was an occurring, basically they agreed, even though they were on opposite sides of the opinion, they essentially agreed that this is a problem. Yet a different majority of the court nonetheless voted to deny relief, right? So both people in concurrence agree there's a delicate balance here, even though one judge voted against the stay. So that decision cries out for this court's intervention, all right? So even they were conflicted in the lower courts. Most fundamentally, Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts. Respondents cannot obtain relief because they brought the wrong claims in the wrong court. They're suing in the wrong location. They style their claims as exclusively arising under the APA. But this court has held that detentions, the Supreme Court, guys, right? You guys have said this. Detentions and removals under the Alien Enemies Act are so bound with critical national security judgments that they are barely amenable to judicial review at all. And judicial review is a very, very charged term. And it means a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. But it's this concept that the judges say what the law is, right? So the executive branch executes the law. Congress passes the laws, right? Then the executive executes the laws. And then when there's a conflict about what it is, the courts say what the law is, kind of this concept that they review it. Oh, they can't do that. Congress can't pass that. That's unconstitutional. We review it. But that has also been now expanded to this concept where essentially the judges can substitute their interpretation for the president's interpretation, or their judgment for the president's judgment. The president says, wait a minute, I have complete Article 2 power under the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land over the Alien Enemies Act or anything else, says, because that's not an amendment to the Constitution, it's a statute. But the idea is Trump has full power to do these things. It's codified in the Constitution. Specifically do this. If the judge then says, no, you did that wrong, or I disagree with your deportation or your whatever, then that is substituting the judge's judgment for the president's judgment. And that's not what the judge does. So the judge can say what the law is subject to their jurisdiction. It's like Venn diagrams, but they're over here. This is the executive, this is you. And they're trying to conflate the two and say they've got total power over everything the executive branch does. That's ridiculous. This court has said no, okay, can't. Even Ludke versus Watkins. Instead, aliens subject to the AEA can only obtain limited judicial review through habeas. There is due process. They just go file a habeas claim in Texas. Here, however, respondents not only abandoned their claims for habeas relief at the lower level courts, but also filed this suit in D.C., not the district in Texas. Why didn't they file it in Texas? Well, we know why, because they wanted Judge Boasberg and the corrupt D.C. Circuit. So dismissal should have followed this on this basis alone. They're literally in the wrong jurisdiction. And this has been happening time and again. They say, well, you canceled our contract. Okay, go file in the Court of Federal Claims. That's the appropriate jurisdiction. They know that they don't want that to happen because it's just a contract claim for monetary damages. They don't want that. They want a remedy, which is to injunction Trump. So they have to then drape it all in this constitutional flair and fervor and make believe that the Constitution is being violated because a new executive just canceled their contracts, right? Happening in multiple domains. It's the same pattern. But they still say, we still have jurisdiction, and so we'll just take this and run with it. Oh, it is a constitutional claim. I'm a district judge. I have to enforce the Constitution. It's a contract claim. You know that. But no majority of the D.C. Circuit resolved that question about jurisdiction. They don't want to touch it because they know they don't have jurisdiction, and they want to keep it in D.C. So Judge Walker's dissent, we read through here earlier this week, rightly recognized that the AEA plaintiffs must seek habeas. That's their due process. Judge Millett's concurrent incorrectly blessed the APA claims, but Judge Henderson's concurrence, the deciding vote, inexplicably, she said, assumed jurisdiction because she was too much of a weenie to explain what that means. I just assume it, yeah. Then refused to decide whether they could even bring their APA claim, so just didn't want to address it, right? Nice judge. Now, on top of that, the district court also improperly used class certification to effectively impose a backdoor nationwide injunction against the proclamation. Judge Boasberg certified a class of terrorists in America. A federal judge is allowing a class action lawsuit, essentially, by Tren de Aragua. Now, this court has held that to certify a class under the rules, courts must follow a rigorous process and procedures that make sure we have an ascertainable class and make sure there's commonality and there's capable of a mass resolution, right? There's these rules you go through to certify a class. It's kind of a complicated process. But the district court certified a circular class, Supreme Court, they're saying, of, listen to this. Can you believe this? Certified a circular class, Judge Roberts and Amy, of all non-citizens in the U.S. custody, saying who were subject to the proclamation without any of the usual procedural or substantive guardrails at all. When it is easier to certify classes of designated foreign terrorists than it is a garden variety class action over defective products, yeah, right, like your heating pad burned your butt or something, you know how much work you got to do to go get certified as a class action? You know, this product's defective. We all have burnt booties. It's a problem. It's a lot of work. You get lawyers, they run commercials. Have you been injured by mesothelioma? You having a difficult time breathing today? You know, all these, it's like a lot of work. Man, it should have just trafficked some fentanyl across the border. Judge Boasberg's like, you're a hero. We're going to have to certify you a class. We don't want your due process rights to be violated. Says something has gone seriously awry here. What kind of country is this? Yet no majority of the D.C. Circuit passed on the question. And Judge Walker found it unnecessary after concluding that their claims belong in habeas, right? Even Walker didn't talk about the terrorist class certification. Judge Millett opined that a swift class action is necessary to preserve these aliens' rights, since we had to do it, said the Court of Appeals judge. But Judge Henderson's tie-breaking concurrence didn't even talk about class action. Okay, so in other words, they're skipping over the necessary requirements before the lawsuit is even can be talked about on its merits. Even taking Boasberg's mistaken view that courts have a broad role to play in interpreting the Alien Enemies Act on its own terms, its orders are unsupportable, this judge. The AEA, writes Trump to the Supreme Court, requires the president to make two findings before designating alien enemies and removing them. Okay, the law says I got to do two things, says Trump. We did. Here, the TDA members are involved in threatening or attempting an invasion or predatory incursion, and that they have done that. Now, the president made both findings based on specific descriptions of their hostile activities, close intertwinement with the Maduro regime in Venezuela. But the courts below nullified that. They didn't even engage in it. So, Supreme Court, listen. Only you, this court, can stop rule by TRO from further upending the separation of powers. And Judge Roberts, hello, the sooner the better. Here, Judge Boasberg's orders have rebuffed President Trump's judgments as how to best protect the nation against foreign terrorists. And more broadly, this judge ruling the country by TRO has become so commonplace among the lower level courts that the executive branch's basic functions are in peril. In the 2 months since Inauguration Day, says Trump, district courts have issued more than 40 injunctions or TROs against Trump. That number is growing by the day. 40. Whereas district courts issued 14 total universal injunctions in the first 3 years of Biden's terms, they issued 15 universal injunctions in February alone. Okay, Biden, 15, Trump, 15 in 1 month. 15 in 3 years versus 15 in 1 month. The framers prized an energetic executive with decision-making, activity, secrecy, and dispatch as necessary for good government, not an executive branch that is dealt with injunctions to restrain the president from providing his duties to the nation. So, Supreme Court, you need to do something about this. They write to the Supreme Court, all right, listen, 9 judges, Tren de Aragua is a transnational criminal organization emanating from Venezuela that does a bunch of bad things. Trump found they are terrorists. Now, the threat is so acute that even Rubio consulted with the cabinet officers. They certified it accordingly, saying terrorist activity and harm. Now, given that TDA poses a significant threat to national security, government officials at the White House and the State Department have expended significant efforts engaging with foreign governments to afuera these people as quickly as possible. Lots of negotiations. Going to El Salvador, they were intensive and delicate. So then on March 14th, the president signed the proclamation. He said, we're being incurred and invaded. The proclamation outlines his findings, and the president found that they do commit brutal crimes, harming Americans. Additionally found that they create basically a hybrid criminal state in Venezuela alone, and that they are infiltrating our country, should be apprehended and subject to immediate deportation. The proclamation came in, and then afterwards, lawsuits, of course. ACLU gangbanger lawyers came screeching in, crashing their cars in here, said, we got to file a lawsuit. So then 5 Venezuelan nationals sued in D.C. to block the government from throwing them out. Several respondents said, we're not members of TDA. No, we're like barbers and we're like cooks and stuff now. We're wrongly designated as such. Though only 3 of the 5 initially pressed that argument, right? So only 3 said, no, we're not TDA. Now, nonetheless, respondents moved to certify the class. So they said, oh, it's a class member. We need a gangbanger TDA class certifications. They'll probably be running commercials soon. Are you a Tren de Aragua gangbanger who is being brutalized by President Trump's dictatorship? If you are, call the ACLU lawyers. We'll represent you for free. So hours after respondents filed their complaint, and without even waiting to hear from the government, Judge Boasberg from the district court granted a TRO, said, we love gangbangers here. You can't take them out. Now, there was a hearing without even waiting from the government. At the hearing, the government then showed up later. Counsel explained that certification of a nationwide class was not appropriate at all. They can go file a habeas claim in Texas. And respondents explained if the court felt like it needed to dismiss the habeas claim, we can do that. And the judge said, nope, don't worry about it. Class is certified, so we can move on. Now, turning to the merits, writes Trump to SCOTUS, the district court did not question TDA's designation, including that they conduct warfare, right? Judge Boasberg didn't challenge that. But the court nonetheless held that the respondents are going to win because the act does not provide a basis for the president's proclamation, saying that predatory incursion is questionable, and so we're going to find in favor of the terrorists. and then explain how the order would be implemented. The government appealed this, and on Sunday, we filed an emergency application for a stay. Then we moved the district court to vacate the TRO. They said no, the proclamation is not legal. The district court further said that they're going to suffer harm if we deport these people to El Salvador. Then we appealed it, 2-1 ruling denying a stay. Judge Henderson voted to deny the stay. Judge Walker wrote a great dissent. We read it here. The district court's TROs are scheduled to expire on Saturday, except the judge literally just extended them today, extending those. So Trump is appealing now, okay? A lot of background there, but here we are. They say, listen, Judge, Supreme Court, this is going on all over the country. Can you please do something about this? Here's why. The government is going to win, all right? To begin, judicial review by Judge Boasberg is extremely limited when we talk about the AEA, okay? It's confined to habeas. File a petition saying they're being illegally detained. But when they filed this complaint in Judge Boasberg's court, he encouraged them to drop the habeas claims. Because he knows if he has that, he has to get rid of it and has to go back to Texas. So then they just kind of modified it. They said, well, it's an APA claim. And the courts took it on that basis. But they are wrong. They brought the wrong claims in the wrong forum. The Alien Enemies Act buttresses the president's Article 2 authorities over national security, gives him specific power to remove alien enemies. And this court, you Supreme Court, even you, Amy Coney Barrett, has held largely that that power is unreviewable by judges. It is a decision that lies with the president. If the judge gets to say, well, that decision's bad or something like that, that is the judge being the president. The exception is for habeas claims. Now, the government agrees a cause of action would be available. If they've got a problem with this removal, go file a habeas. Don't file a constitutional lawsuit in D.C. Because their claims sound in habeas, they must be brought in Texas. Now, this court, Supreme Court, has long recognized that the president has broad national security authority under the AEA. It is not to be subjected to the scrutiny of the courts. The act grants the president an authority as unlimited as the legislature could make it, okay? It's big. Drawing from the established English rule that alien enemies have no rights and no privileges unless by the king's special favor during the time of war, the act confers on the president the power to determine which alien enemies are subject to removal. Now, the very nature of that sweeping authority rejects the notion that courts may pass judgment upon it. The discretion goes to the president. If the discretion goes to the judge is the president. We should vote for the judge and all those things. We don't. So Ludke thus declined to second guess the president's power to detain and remove a German alien after World War II fighting, explaining that judges have neither technical competence nor the official responsibility over matters of political judgment. And they're not accountable to political judgment either. Okay, if the American people are mad that Trump is deporting terrorists, he'll pay for it. Okay, his polls will crash. People will be upset with whatever he tries to do. Politicians will start to peel off. Republicans in the House will get mad. Well, my constituents are mad because all of our gangbangers are being deported. They're really letting me have it on the phones every day saying, where are our fentanyl dealers? Oh, they don't seem to be on the streets anymore. Where are they? And then, things will start to buckle. Judges have appointment for life. They're there forever. So there is no recourse for their insanity in violating the American Constitution. There is no recourse. We can't get rid of them. That's why they can do what they do, because they're going to go to their cocktail parties knowing that there will never be 67 votes for their removal, and Congress is too pathetic to divest them of any other jurisdiction or funds. But that's why we say they can't do this stuff. They have to stay in their lane. But the AEA does not foreclose all opportunity to test the legality of the alien enemy detention. In fact, they can bring a claim. Just bring it in habeas. Ludke from the Supreme Court acknowledged that the question as to whether the person restrained is in fact an alien enemy 14 years of older may be reviewed by the courts in habeas where they're being detained. And they're free to go request a hearing, go file it in that context. Detainees may be able to obtain narrow review of the construction and the validity of the statute, but not the merits of the president's discretionary decision to remove them. Instead, the review is limited to questions like, is the detainee an alien? Whether the detainee is among the people of the hostile nation, right? They can fight over that in a proceeding over them specifically, not over the president's decision about the proclamation in Washington. Such claims fell within the historical core of habeas. Ludke from the Supreme Court itself was brought as a habeas action. Indeed, the few Alien Enemies Act cases on the books almost invariably came through habeas. That is because the habeas writ historically existed to challenge the detention by government officials. Now, the existence of a habeas remedy to challenge this means they can't bring an APA claim, right? Under the APA, you can bring claims when there's no other forum to bring a claim. They say, go bring a habeas claim in Texas. That's a perfect forum. Thus, the DC Circuit has long recognized that the availability of habeas in another district over an alien's effort to pose a constitutional attack, it's similar. Now, the APA review is only available for a final agency action, there it is, for which there is no other adequate remedy in court. There is an adequate remedy. It's called habeas. Go file it in Texas. So, therefore, it forecloses their claims. Now, it's interesting. They say they kind of screwed up here, saying about these people, these gangbang ACLU lawyers, saying they labeled their complaint a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. So, like, they know what that means. They looked that up and they asked the district court in Boasberg to grant a writ of habeas corpus to prevent their removal under the AEA. But then they abandoned the habeas claim, right? Because it's like, case law says that it's in Texas. Instead, they focused on the APA remedy because Judge Boasberg is like, hey, ixnay on the habeas A, okay? Just get rid of it. And the court clarified that we're only allowing them to challenge that the basis for its order to permit them to challenge their status, but they say that's the habeas claim. But habeas claims must be brought where they're being detained. So, should have happened in Texas, but they filed in DC. And so they cannot strap on an APA type of claim to attack the Alien Enemies Act. The APA is particularly a poor fit for this because it's an agency action. It's not a proclamation. It came from the president. It's a presidential proclamation, not an agency action. So you can't sue under this. Now, the decisions below from the Judge Boasberg and from the Court of Appeals disregarded this problem completely. Indeed, no majority of the DC Circuit even rejected the habeas argument. Only Judge Millett concluded that their claims are not habeas claims. But the other two judges, one said it's definitely a habeas claim, and the other didn't talk about it. So they didn't decide that issue. And if they did, and you should, Supreme Court, you'll know that this case has to go bye-bye. By contrast, Judge Walker said they don't have a claim. It must be brought in Texas. It's not under an APA claim, and it would be decisive. If this was habeas, it would have to be dismissed out of here and go back to Texas. Now, Judge Millett and the Court of Appeals and Boasberg, their arguments are crap. They reasoned that habeas was not the proper path for review because they only seek relief from removal and not from detention, right? Very sneaky. Well, they're not seeking to be released from custody. They're just seeking to be removed from the country. Very, careful nuance there. But the substance of the complaint, they have to sue. It dictates whether it sounds off in habeas. And the substance of their complaint is the authority to issue the proclamation from the president under which they are being held. That is a detention claim. That is a habeas claim. So you can't try to be sneaky with your words here. They're talking about their detention under the proclamation. Put otherwise, their claim sounds in habeas because they aim at undermining the basis of their detention under the Alien Enemies Act, which is a habeas claim. And as even Judge Walker explained in the dissent below, habeas courts have long entertained claims analogous to theirs. In other words, we're trying to see what type of claim it is. We look at all of these other types of claims. They look identical to what they're complaining about. Here, their request to block their removal focuses on their request not to be transferred to a foreign country. Now, that ultimately is about detention authority, And so it's habeas. Now, the other courts, Boasberg and Millett from the Court of Appeals, erroneously concluded that these other cases foreclose those arguments, but we can distinguish those cases. They're not the same at all. And the APA cannot coexist as a claim with the other claims. There's only one. You can only come to the APA after final agency action and more. But look, Judge, Supreme Court, even if Boasberg could review their APA claims, the Administrative Procedures Act claims, it lacked authority to certify and grant a remedy to a class of terrorists. The court certified a class, literally, of all non-citizens who were subject to the Tren Proclamation. That is a class action for terrorists. But that highly truncated class certification was highly improper. You can't just do it in 2 seconds. The court certified a non-ascertainable class consisting of anyone in U.S. custody based on allegations by putative class members who claim they do not belong to TDA, right? You see how twisted that logic is? You have this group of 5 people who come. They say, we're being illegally detained. We're not TDA gangbangers at all. You can't deport us. And the judge says, well, you say you're not terrorists, and so the proclamation does not cover you, but I am then going to then cover everybody who the proclamation does cover without knowing whether or not they are terrorists either, right? So in other words, like, because you say you're not terrorists or Tren de Aragua, everybody else also does, and I can impute your position to everyone else. They're not even a party to this lawsuit. And maybe Trump found that they are actual terrorists, right? This is the problem when you do this, is let the people speak for themselves, right? Go file your habeas claim in Texas. You can make your case as to why you specifically are not a gangbanger and not just presume that everybody else isn't. So it's like lunacy. The judge goes, well, I'm just going to apply it to everybody, but by awarding relief to this nationwide class, the court effectively circumvented national security. And so the Supreme Court should vacate this immediately. So the district court certified this class. By the way, the rules say you need rigorous analysis, Supreme Court. They didn't do that at all. He did it from the bench. The government couldn't even file a brief. The court offered only the statement that class certification is warranted. That's all. That's the one sentence. The judge says, I find class certification is warranted under the federal rules. Never explained why any of the factors were satisfied. Never put it in writing, because it's cowardly of him to do this, and he doesn't want it to be in permanent record. Nor did the court satisfy any other procedural requirements as well. Those requirements are indispensable. You can't just certify somebody without explaining it. Certified classes not only place pressure on defendants and more, but due process requires it as well. For example, in these other cases, there was a serious process that went before certifying somebody, before certifying a class. And so this should be vacated. It's not a class. At least the class portion of this should all be vacated as well. And there are substantive defects in the decision. Here, Boasberg certified a class of all non-U.S. citizens, not citizens. The proclamation applies only to TDA members, but all 5 named people in the lawsuit say that they are not TDA members. So how can they represent a class of gangbangers if they say that they're not gangbangers? So in other words, this judge is certifying a class of gangbangers who are not even in his courtroom. The people who are suing say that they're not TDA. So why is he protecting all of the other TDA members who are not even suing? The class is also defined, includes way too much variation to satisfy this rule. Individuals who claim that they're not gangbangers may be more interested in challenges to the procedures, but individuals who are gangbangers might be more interested in challenging Trump's authority under a different provision. But there are a lot of problems. You can't certify a class of terrorists. Now, more generally, the grant of class-wide relief here is a disturbing innovation in a widespread efforts from district court judges. The whole nation is being governed from their courtrooms. The order here effectively blocked the executive from implementing a proclamation against anyone currently in custody. Universal injunctions are extending Article 3 courts and their powers. And they're expanding the remedies way beyond this case. To avoid venue flaws, they're doing other things. And a majority of the Court of Appeals below, they're saying, Supreme Court, there are a ton of issues ripe for you to come in here. The judges bypassed the propriety of class certifications. They bypassed the jurisdiction of habeas. They didn't even reach the merits. So, in other words, the Court of Appeals did a terrible job. And so you should come in and hear it. But these lower courts sidestepped all of these other arguments. Their initial TRO from Boasberg didn't even offer a reasoned analysis of the president's proclamation. They just presume that Trump is doing something illegal and issue these sweeping orders without giving it any due analysis. The district court also avoided any of these outcome determinative questions, right? If he had to talk about habeas, case is gone. If he had to talk about class, the judge doesn't care about these plaintiffs per se. He cares about stopping Trump nationally. Maybe because his daughter gets money from the government in some way. I don't know. But the judge, and issuing a tie-breaking concurrence, explained that courts maintain authority to interpret these predicate acts. So the judge said, well, I actually don't think it is quite an incursion, and the proclamation is unlawful because the preconditions have not been met. Okay, we don't think it's a predatory incursion. That's not your judgment call. That's the president's judgment call. That's why the president got elected. You don't get to substitute your judgment. That is a theft, an insurrection of the presidency. So even as they recognize a lot of these orders are appealable, these are acting as TROs, but they're not TROs. They're preliminary injunctions in practice. The orders are appealable. They are enjoining the president. Even Judge Henderson in her concurrence said, yeah, this could risk scuttling the national, international diplomacy that we don't have the capability to interfere with. So these questions raise concern, and the Supreme Court needs to weigh in. This is self-evidently no ordinary case, okay? The D.C. Circuit took the unusual step of holding an expedited argument 9 days after getting this application. They issued 93 pages of opinions 2 days later. We read the dissent. This case raises paramount questions, Supreme Court, about the president's constitutional and statutory authority to protect the nation against terrorists and warfare and irregular warfare. And Boasberg and the lower level D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals irreparably harmed the United States. Even the dissenting judge agrees. The United States would suffer irreparable harm. And Boasberg blocking the continued removal is literally presenting an unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States. We have an interest in prompt removal of these people. And the record reinforces this. Tren de Aragua are the worst, committing all sorts of extremely serious crimes, causing mayhem in the United States. The president was elected by the American people. He talked about this, and he's doing what he's been elected to do. They say that stopping the deportations creates no risk to the public. That's ridiculous. This is causing harm, but it wouldn't cause harm to the respondents. Judge Millett in the district court saying we are wrongfully removing these people. But guess what? Aliens are not entitled to drawn out procedures to attack immediate removals. You don't get to break into someone's house and then demand that they make you a sandwich before they throw you out. And you get to talk to somebody before you're evicted. The government agrees that respondents are permitted to judicial review under the AEA. If they want to see a judge, file a habeas claim. They conceded an oral argument that they could seek relief in Texas, but they just don't want to. So it's not going to harm them. Dismiss this case. They can go file in Texas. Even Judge Millett came out and said, we're complying with international law. We're agreeing with the Convention Against Torture and all these things, penalizing the United States for failing to reveal all the details of how this is going to happen in El Salvador is national security information. We're complying with the law and doing what we need to do. So this court, Supreme Court, should grant an administrative stay. At minimum, we ask that you grant a stay while you consider our submissions. Judge Boasberg's flawed orders threaten the government's sensitive negotiations. And as long as these orders remain in force, the United States is unable to rely on the Alien Enemies Proclamation with Tren de Aragua to get these terrorists out of our country. And the court's orders are likely to be extended by another 2 weeks. Spoiler alert, they were. And in circumstances like these, we need a vacature of the lower orders. And so Supreme Court, writes Trump, vacate Judge Boasberg's orders and allow us to continue to deport Tren de Aragua out of our country. Written in the Supreme Court of the United States. And John Roberts came out and ordered a response to be due by April 1st. But don't be fooled. Get that brief in. So, of course, we're going to continue to cover this. But Trump came out, was talking about Boasberg, and said, how disgraceful is it that Judge James Boasberg has just been given a fourth Trump case, which is, statistically impossible. There is no way for a Republican, especially a Trump Republican, to win before him. He is highly conflicted, not only in his hatred of me, massive Trump derangement syndrome, but also because of the disqualifying family conflicts, like his wife who runs an abortion clinic or founded one, and daughter who works for some institute of justice who arguably represents indigent illegal aliens, says that may not want to be deported, right? So the judge, well, that's weird. You might have a conflict there with your daughter since she works for indigent illegals. Maybe you're protecting some of them who might be TDA gangbangers. I don't know. But Boasberg seems to be grabbing the Trump cases all for himself, and he's the chief judge, even though it is not supposed to happen that way. Is there still such a thing as a wheel where the judges are chosen fairly and at random? The good news is that it probably doesn't matter because it is virtually impossible for me to get an honest ruling in D.C. anyways. Our nation's courts are broken. With New York and D.C. being the most preeminent, all in their corruption and radicalism, there must be an immediate investigation of the rigged system before it's too late, says President Trump. And Elon's noticing the same thing. He was on with the Doge crew last night talking about what they're doing to save the country and got asked a question about these corrupt judges in Washington.
Are you surprised at some of the legal efforts and some of the judges that have weighed in? There's about 8 or 10 now of these cases that are at least temporary holds. They're being challenged by the DOJ.
Right.
Are you surprised by that pushback?
Well, it's the D.C. Circuit is notorious for having a very far-left bias. And when you look at the people close to some of these judges, where are they working? Oh, they're working at these NGOs. Oh, they're the ones getting this money. Does that seem like a system that lacks corruption? It sounds like corruption to me.
Yeah, it sure does. And Judge Boasberg's wife, I think she goes by the name Liddy. Her name is Elizabeth Manson. And she even brought around, I think, Xavier Becerra and others from the Biden administration to go tour her abortion clinic where they get rid of babies. So that's an interesting development there, of course, to see and continue to follow those connections. But we've also got other gang members who are being deported, and we'll see if these judges want to invite them into their homes. But Trump was asked about this, and these MS-13 leaders who were just arrested as a result of a recent op.
You and your team apprehended a top 3 leader in the violent gang, MS-13, yesterday, just 30 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. What has made you and your team so effective in finding, locating, apprehending, and deporting these violent, illegal migrants?
I love this guy. I wish more people would ask questions like that. Thank you. That's very nice. I appreciate it. And they happen. All you're doing is being fair with you when you ask a question in that way. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and all of the rest of law enforcement. I think we have to include ICE and Border Patrol. Paul of Border Patrol, the whole group from Border Patrol. They're so incredible, and it's dangerous stuff, hard stuff, and it's really an unforced error because these people were allowed into this country and they shouldn't have been in this country. They would have never been in this country. We're getting rid of some of the worst criminals in the world. They came out of jails and mental institutions from all over the world, but Pam and the whole group, and Kash, who's here, and it's so good to have him. I see him all over. He's working 24 hours a day, but the job they've done is incredible.
Let's go, Kash.
And they caught one of the worst criminals in the world, I guess, in terms of evilness. You don't get any worse than the MS-13 guys and the Tren de Aragua guys. You could flip a coin. It's a rough group. And, you know, the big thing is they have to be able to do their job. I was watching it on television like you, and I saw the home that he lived in a good area, but boy, they had a lot of weaponry in there, right? Highly sophisticated, really brutal stuff. So I appreciate the question, and I just want to thank Cash and Pam and the whole group for doing a fantastic, and the local law enforcement who's been so terrific working with local law enforcement and even first responders. So I want to thank everybody, and thank you very much.
So judges will continue to do everything they can to stall Trump's agenda, but Cash, Pam, Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, the rest of them are literally continuing to round up the bad guys and get them out of here. And the Supreme Court now will be weighing in. We'll be here to see what comes next. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do. But we're not done yet, my friend, so don't move a muscle because we've got some other stuff to get into. And this one is also great news from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Big victory for President Trump. Finally, a little sanity coming out of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. This case involved Kathy A. Harris. She was a leader over at the Merit Systems Protection Board, over working for them in the prior administration. Trump came in, fired her booty, and she sued. She said, "How dare you? You can't get rid of me. This is who I am. I'm confirmed by the Senate. And I'm vice chairman," all this stuff. And she served as when she worked at another law firm, she was co-manager of Cater Parks Weiser. She served as the chair of the firm's sexual harassment and LGBT practice sections, which is very offensive and non-inclusive because it's missing the QIA expialidocious 2L spirit people. Ms. Harris has practiced employment law, other things. So Trump came in and said, no thanks. You're fired, Kathy. Get out. So Kathy said, "No, I'm a public servant. I'm going to serve whether you want me to or not." And she sued. And she was winning for quite a long time. She sued Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, and they were succeeding and going up. Trump was appealing and so on until today. The order has come down and says, upon consideration for the emergency motion for a stay, in other words, the lower level court said, "You, Kathy, can get your job back," just like they tried to do with Scott Bessent. Remember, with Hampton Dellinger, who also sued Scott Bessent. Hampton Dellinger lost this one too and started to withdraw his lawsuit. So now Kathy was trying to weasel her way back in, but the court came down and said Trump wins. Okay, the motion for a stay is granted. And what that normally means is that they're going to win on the merits outright, right? They're going to come back, and once it hits full throttle, they're going to win. So Court of Appeals coming back down, giving us this decision. This was Walker, who we read a very good dissent from in the Boasberg case in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, says, look, Article 2 of the Constitution vests the executive power in the President of the United States. That's it. It's not an office with a committee. Executive branch agencies do not disrupt that design when they are accountable to the president. That court's precedent controls this court's cases. Now, under other precedents of the Supreme Court, the government is going to win, showing that the statutory removal protections for this board, for the National Labor Relations Board and the Merit Systems Protection Board, are unconstitutional. So remember, the way that these little sham committees were created, they call themselves independent bodies because our government has been corrupt for the last however many decades or centuries. But I don't know when these boards were created, probably like 80s, 90s, recently, 70s maybe. So I think it's a newer phenomenon. The founding era, they didn't put up with this crap, but they created these independent bodies, right? And they said, well, they kind of exist independent of everything. Where in the Constitution, what branch of government do those reside under? They don't. They're made up, and they got tons of money and probably trillions of dollars over the last several decades for their grift. Now they're going away. because they don't have lawful permission to exist. The government has also shown that it will suffer irreparable injury if you can't fire these people. And Congress created them and they said, well, they're independent bodies, and so the president can't fire them unless they notify Elizabeth Warren. But here's the background saying that the National Labor Relations Board and Merit Systems Protection Board are executive branch agencies. Trump came in and fired them. Harris then sued. She said, you can't fire me. 7 days later, the district court granted her request, shoved her back in the government. The government said, no. We've met the statutory criteria for removal. And actually, I'm sorry. The government said, we don't need to give you statutory criteria for removal. Okay. Congress said you can only fire these people if like X, Y, and Z for like bad actions or, poor performance, whatever, corrupt behavior. Trump said, I'm not complying with your stupid firing limitations. They're fired. You can't limit my Article 2 power to remove these people. And did that across the board. And they say, well, he's right. Before addressing all of this, it's prudent to address the history of this. Says, let me explain where this came from. The judge writes, under the Articles of Confederation, before we had our U.S. Constitution, the early republic experienced the perils of having a weak executive. It was kind of a mess. With no executive that was separate from Congress, the government, the federal government, which was very loose at the time, had to rely on the state's good graces to carry out national policies. And it was powerless to respond to anything like the 1786 Shays Rebellion. They said our government was like a shadow without power or effect. So when the framers met in 1786, they wanted to create a cohesive strategy here. After their experience with other governments, they said that they needed a divided legislature. So we wanted two houses of Congress and a unified executive. The framers debated how to do all this to avoid monarchy and tyranny. But ultimately, they insisted upon unity in the federal executive to ensure vigor and accountability to the people. They settled on a single executive, the President of the United States, who would be personally responsible, right? One person responsible for the entire branch. That unity affords the president decisiveness, action, secrecy, and dispatch. They knew that there was a risk to this. So how do we deal with a strong executive? We don't want it to devolve into tyranny. Their solution? Make the president the most democratic and politically accountable official in the entire government, elected by the entire nation, resulting in a strategy that's straightforward. Divide power everywhere else except in the president, and you make the president accountable to the people. Judges are not accountable to the people at all, not even at all. They might think they are, or like they're protecting the Constitution. They cannot be removed hardly against all efforts, right? Unless you have a real big problem. So the Constitution assigns a lofty role to the president, and the president has to carry out his duties. There's vesting clauses and other things. Founding era history confirms this understanding, saying we want the president to be able to do things. There were debates about this. The House debated various theories and more. Even James Madison said, the executive power included the power to oversee executive officers. And how do you oversee executive officers? You can remove them. In retrospect, other decisions we now realize are vested in the president alone. And the same thing happened in history. George Washington removed almost 20 officers, consuls, tax collectors, surveyors, military officers, and more. Subsequent presidents also dismissed people. John Adams removed Secretary Pickering. Andrew Jackson removed William Duane. William Henry Harrison removed other people. Now, to be sure, sometimes there was opposition in Congress. They got all mad about it. Like the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. He removed Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. So they impeached him for it. Now, the Senate narrowly acquitted Johnson. They said, well, I guess we can stay in office. It was very contentious, but everybody removes everybody. And so with those underpinnings, I turn to more recent precedent. In Myers in 1920, President Woodrow Wilson removed Postmaster Frank Myers, and they said that was fine. President has supervisory power, and They can't limit this through Congress. And the court specifically included the power to remove people. Myers was a landmark decision, but it established that the president's removal power is grounded in the constitutional text and it's bolstered by tradition. Then we have the Humphreys executor case, which is crap. It reaffirmed the core holding of Myers, saying the president can remove people, but in 6 quick pages, Humphreys carved out an exception for agencies, right? This is a terrible case. According to the court, the exception permitted Congress to insulate officers of the relevant agency called the FTC from at-will removal. But the Humphreys court conceded the ambiguity in this because in Humphreys, they said, well, it's kind of like a committee, and a committee you can kind of put limits on. But it's very different than here. Now, one might say Humphreys had one good year in 1958 when the court applied it to this case, but that opinion took for granted that the commission was purely an adjudicatory body, not even close to the same. Then there was another case where the court declined to extend Humphreys. So in other words, the pattern is looking more like cases are ruling against Humphreys. We got Selah Law, which extended and declined to extend Humphreys into the removal of the CFBP board. And then that same thing happened again in Collins when we got to the FHFA. We've covered this lineage here a lot. So they're going through it. And this is basically Trump's DOJ's argument that they're adopting, which is right. It's the right argument. The text, history, and the precedent are clear. The Constitution says executive power goes to a president. For a court to conclude otherwise is inappropriate. So lots of case law here, and we're fast forwarding. So through the stay factors, they say Trump's going to win. Trump has the power to fire this person based on all of this lineage, and he's going to go through it again. So a lot here. Under a faithful application of this, we're going to extend it basically. Okay, we've already found that we can fire other people, so we're going to extend it to this as well. The Merit Systems Protection Board is an executive agency, right? This resides, as it relates to Harris, it resides under the executive branch, and so it can do all these things: hear and adjudicate, order federal agencies to do these things, and these are exercises of executive power. So there we go. Now Harris disagrees. Kathy, she says, no, it's more like an adjudication. It's like a court. So you can't fire us. But they say, no, it's not temporary. It's a permanent body. You do executive things. And so you can be fired. And so fast forwarding through a lot of this analysis, that we reach a conclusion. It says the district courts did their level best to follow Supreme Court precedent. No, they didn't. But their fidelity to that precedent is selective. By reading Humphrey's executor in an expansive manner, they read it in a manner that the newer cases preclude. The newer cases revise this, so you can't read it in the old way. Even the most casual reader will have guessed by now that I agree with how Selah and Collins read that case, but even if I disagreed with them, this court would lack the authority to undo what they did. For a lower court like us to do that, that would be a power grab. And so, great decision. In other words, you can fire Kathy Harris. So Kathy Harris, you're fired again. Okay, so get out again. Your lower level stay is no longer valid. So pack your bags and get out of there. So some nice changes happening there, and more nice changes happening with Alina Habba going in as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New Jersey. Here's how that announcement sounded today.
First and foremost, as I said in my speech, and I wish I had had more time, but, you know, I have to get to work. But President Trump has always been the biggest mentor, the greatest president, and frankly, friend, and the best client I could have ever had, because he took me to see something about injustice in this country that has to stop. We're talking about those TROs. They have to stop. And now he's entrusting me to take care of New Jersey and to take care of crime in New Jersey. And that is the plan. I've been getting swamped with information. I have a call with the FBI shortly after this to get right up to speed and make sure that we're arresting people. And I know, America, I'm seeing what you're saying. You want to see arrests? They're coming. I am coming. If you are a criminal in New Jersey, you better watch out, because I am not soft on crime, and I will be taking the president's agenda, but most importantly, the American agenda. It's not political. It's about safety. It's about putting America first, and now New Jersey will be my priority. First and foremost, as I said.
Oh boy, Alina Habba coming in. You hear that, criminals? You are warned. And there's a lot of criminality happening there in New Jersey. We wonder what politicians have made their way through there and given themselves to Alina's jurisdiction. We're looking forward to seeing what comes next. We're going to keep our eye on this case, of course, and see what happens, see whether these individuals appeal this further. I don't think that Kathy Harris will. I think she'll probably allow this one to peter out. She was always on the losing side of this, but they tried to do their damage while they had the ear of the lower level district court. So we'll keep our eye on this one. Kathy Harris fired again. Afuera, your booty, right out of there. All right, now we got one final update on the day, and this is a fun one. Full hazmat response is exactly what you would expect from Fani Willis's office. We know that she has already been condemned by a judge in Georgia for having a noxious odor in her prosecution of President Trump. We know that she was also seen palling around with her lover. They said under oath that this relationship had terminated. Certainly doesn't look like that with Fani Willis, an elected DA of Georgia, Fulton County, one of the biggest counties in the country, waddling around in her yoga pants in Georgia. But we'll come back to that one. But the story is a full hazmat response. They had to evacuate the building near Fani. You can imagine why. But there's also probably another reason. There was a suspicious parcel containing an unidentified white substance. Don't know if Hunter Biden was in the area or what, but there was a substantial section of a courthouse in downtown Atlanta that was evacuated last week. Described in news reports as a white substance that led to people being treated for headaches and dizziness and more. And we don't know if it was a Fani odor, if she, left the building and somebody also, dropped some flour or something. We're like, is that Fani or is those drugs? We don't really know. But anyways, 4 people exhibited symptoms and they had to be taken to the hospital. So we don't know if it was her noxious odor or what, but there is a scandal brewing, and the Senate out in Georgia is looking for answers on this. We're going to listen to a little bit of this. But as we saw, Fani was palling around with Nathan Wade at the airport again. Where are they going? They went on cruises. They went to Napa Valley. They had wine together. There's Fani bending over for the camera. Oh, gosh. Nathan's carrying the bags. That's good. Except not anymore. Now she's carrying it again. So what happened? They said that their relationship was over. All right. But they're not over, okay? They're still palling around. And so the question is, what is going to happen with the Senate? And Fani is not happy about getting subpoenaed. She said that she's going to come back, and if she's called to testify, she's going to have some words for them. But here's what happened at the Senate hearing in Georgia as they continue to dig into what's happening in Faniland.
What are those documents? Because what you're telling me is she is objecting in our subpoena to documents that she has already produced in other litigation that went to the Court of Appeals.
Presumably, I can't, Mr. Chairman, I can't say for certain what documents that are being objected to because we've never received an itemized list of, as you normally would. So if there's an objection and it's being withheld on attorney-client privilege or work product, typically you provide, and I think the law requires you provide a privilege log, which is where you identify the date of the document, the persons, for example, if it's a communication, who are in that communication, or if it's a memo, who drafted the memo, a general subject, so it could be, legal authority, and then the basis for the objection. We've never received that. We candidly don't know what documents they're objecting to and what documents are there. So given the need as the General Assembly winds down, and I know that there was continued interest in this issue, what we asked is just give us what you've already given opposing counsel in the litigation that led to the Court of Appeals order. Give us the documents that you have provided to the U.S. House of Representatives pursuant to its investigatory subpoena. And the committee reserves the right to issue another subpoena. But
that underlying litigation was where the trial court disqualified her or Mr. Wade. They had to choose one of them had to withdraw from
Judge
the case.
McAfee, remember that one?
And she then appealed that at the Court of Appeals, and they upheld that trial court order.
Yes.
Okay, and that is now being appealed to the Supreme Court.
I believe so, yes.
So there's documents that were relevant in that action to disqualify her from further prosecution of the 16 or 18 defendants that we know exist and that have been produced to somebody before, and you have an agreement with opposing counsel that we will at least receive those documents?
We will
with no objection?
We will receive those documents without objection.
And when are we going to get them?
That's the next step. So that agreement was reached on March 10. The petitioners did respond to the court in timely on March 12. We responded to theirs and said, look, court, we have an agreement on this. We reserve the right to issue additional subpoenas. We reserve the right to do others. And by the way, there's never been an objection to the witness subpoena to come testify to this committee. And in any prior court order, it has not addressed any objections to the witness subpoena. So it is our position, filed in the litigation, that those arguments are waived. And certainly we've indicated that if she comes and a question is asked that she believes is privileged, she can assert the privilege at that time, as you normally do. So to now answer more specifically your question, but with that context, the agreement was reached March 10. We did not receive documents. And so on March 18, a Tuesday, I emailed opposing counsel and asked, when can we get the documents and how? Do you need us to set up a share file system or something to, for the volume of the documents?
Just email them.
Opposing
Dropbox,
counsel responded,
Google Drive,
and said, let me check with the client, essentially. My second email, having not received documents, went to opposing counsel March 24. I did not receive one at that time. Opposing counsel indicated to me that they had a brief or a hearing that they did, and that happens. So I sent another one the next day, March 25, and once again opposing counsel said they will once again check with their client. And on the March 24 and 25 email, I did indicate this committee was meeting, and so they wanted an update, and I just need to know what to tell you as members of the committee. So as of today, I do not have the documents. I did ask for times that the district attorney could appear to satisfy a witness subpoena, whether we issue another one or you issue another one, or it's just done by agreement based on the old one.
Okay, so Fani is not complying, right? This dude is communicating. He's sending a bunch of emails, and they're not responding. But they're not giving up on this, and will be sending more subpoenas. And other judges have said that if you don't comply with this, you might be held in contempt, which might lead to jail. So it's a cat and mouse game. We're going to see what Fani says in response. But according to a report in Atlanta, she's talking tough. Fani fighting back.
Tonight, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, she is firing back
Fani.
after state senators suggested she could be jailed if she ignores their calls to testify. Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon went one-on-one with Willis today. And Doug, she had a stern message for the senators investigating her conduct.
I would say so. She still has not set a date to testify in front of this panel of lawmakers. And she told me today she still feels they lack the authority to pull her in to get her testimony in the first place. But she said if she does sit down in front of them, they're going to hear the truth in her own words. For a little over a year now, that group of state senators has been investigating Willis, her DA's budget, and her conduct after it was revealed she was dating a top prosecutor on her indictment against President Donald Trump and his allies. Back in September, the panel subpoenaed Willis to testify. She contested it, and eventually a judge ruled that lawmakers did, in fact, have the authority to compel her to come in. They said if she doesn't, they'll see contempt charges, which can come with jail time. Willis responded today.
I understand that they are intimidated by a strong woman sitting in this position that's going to hold everyone accountable who violates the law. I am not afraid of a conversation with them, but they better be ready for the truth should they ever have me in that chair.
It sounds like you might be a little afraid because you just got that little frog in your throat once your body knew what a scammer you were. Your throat went like, "Arr!" And look at that little face too right there. Man, she's so smug. We go after everybody. What about you and your lover who defrauded Georgia out of $700,000? Going to go after each other?
And the Senate panel said during a hearing yesterday that they would want to have Willis in to testify sometime in the last week in April or the first 2 weeks in May. From the state capitol, Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
All right, so sorry for being so offensive towards strong women out there. I know we're all so intimidated. I'm so nervous of Fani and Nathan flying around in her leggings on airplanes as an elected DA official. But the hazmat crew was there, and for good reason. Hopefully they were able to remove some of that noxious odor. All right, my friends. Well, if you're just joining us, we had a great stream. Quick recap. So if you want to hit the rewind button and catch up on what we talked about today, we are in the Supreme Court again. We had a great filing submitted by President Trump's Solicitor General in the deportation case. This, of course, is the Boasberg case that is working its way up. Now we're at SCOTUS. We read through the full application for a stay, the full brief, and it's a good one. And I think that, well, I'm hoping that we'll get some action on this one from the Supreme Court. We also heard from Trump. We heard from Elon. We heard more from Trump, and then talked about a second case and another major victory for the president. Of course, this one coming out from the District of Columbia, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and they ruled that Kathy Harris, this woman who was already fired, can be refired again. Bye, Kathy. Have a nice one. So she lost this one. The Court of Appeals granted a stay. The lower court said, Trump, you can't fire her. She's a public servant. Of course, our public servants are now suing us now, so that's really nice of them. But judge shoved her back in. Now the Court of Appeals came back, granted a stay. Trump said, don't do that. Issue a stay. We know what that means, that on the merits, they think Trump has the power, and so she'll likely withdraw her lawsuit, probably like Hampton Dellinger did, because they're just pathetic. Alina Habba going in, taking care of business in New Jersey. Looking forward to that. And we heard that Fani had a full hazmat team have to come and respond because, you know, it's Fani. She's got a noxious odor and stinks. So, my friends, it's been a great stream. I see you sent in some amazing super chats and donos, and we got some new membos in the house. Very grateful to have your support here today. Thank you for joining us, membos. Membos will be back tomorrow, Saturday stream. We can't wait to see you. If you want to join up on Locals, watching thewatchers.locals.com, or click the join button on YouTube, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. It's going to be fun. All right, so my friends, and thanks to our amazing mods who are clipping for us and keeping things nice and beautiful around here. And I wanted to just share, I flagged these before the show started. Before the show started, this was at 2:51, this came in. Debs off 1729 said, Father God, please help President Trump get all those cases passed in Congress, Senate, and federal and Supreme Courts. That will help the American people and impeach the crooked ones standing in the way. Amen. Amen to that. And there was a bunch of love in that one. So we had Ralph saying amen, Muffin Rando saying amen, Ray Hedrick saying amen, John Zimmer, amen, Bruce Wayne, amen. Really good stuff. So amen to the nice opening prayer. What's going on? All right. So we had some great comments and some great donos that have come in today. And let's see where we're at. Where's your boy at? We got starting here, as soon as I can find it. Having a tough one today. Oh, yeah. What's up? Okay. So time to do the Friday dance. Hey, man, look at these kitties. These little kittens getting the Friday boogie woogie on. Love it. What's up? Rub some dirt on it. Rub some dirt on it is our resident astrophotographer. And I'm pretty much an astrophotographer now, too. I bought a smart satellite called C-Star 50. And my new name is now Rob Blood Moon Govea, okay, officially. So thank you for your attention to this matter. Rob, here's the link from one of the best astrophotography YouTubers about using your C-Star 50 in equatorial mode. Ooh, he gets some great results and walks you through the process. Clear skies. Man, I'll check that out. Oh, big warning. Yeah, this is the thing I bought. It's great. That's why I'm now Blood Moon Govea. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool nickname too. I'm happy about it. Thank you for that. I'm going to check it out. I think there's supposed to be a lunar something, right, coming up soon, but I'm not sure that we're going to see it in Arizona. So maybe you will. What's going on? Man, shout out to our astrophotographers, of which I am one now. Run Mead. It is becoming clear why there are no enforcement powers assigned in Article 3. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, we didn't have to give them any powers because they'll just take it from the other branches. And we just have to continually fight them back because these judges are hacks. Like they knew back in time. Hazmat is the name of a condom brand company. Oh, do you supply Fani Willis? Is that what they meant? You were there providing them with what? Hey, Steel Manning says, the TROs for firings are insane. If POTUS can order people to certain death, he can fire employees in his administration. It's right, Steel Manning. But this is when we talk about like the silver lining, like they're just, extending the rope for themselves kind of thing. It's ridiculous. Even the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, that's 2 for 2 now. They said that Hampton lost and she lost. So like they get the picture. Chubby. How many judges are there in the DC Circuit? 15. I'd imagine it's more than the same 3 blatantly biased liberal activists that somehow get Oh, I think you should ask Court of Appeals. That I don't know how many in the Court of Appeals that actively get selected. It's just very strange how it's always the same judges every time. It was Childs, Millett, and Walker, right? We saw that one on the other one we just read earlier this week. It was interesting. Adesia, is the judge part of the invasion? Maybe. He's acting like a co-conspirator by keeping gangbangers in our country. So maybe. Yeah. Doan, what's up, Doan? Says, good God, China runs Maduro. A child knows that. Well, I think that's probably true, but you can't call out China right now. So just by the way, like the world is now in proxy war season. We're not going to be ever at war with Russia, but we were at war with Russia. We're slowly solving that. It was just a proxy war via Ukraine, but we were at war with Russia. Let's be clear. We didn't have soldiers on the ground yet, but I don't know that we're going to get there yet because there's too much interconnection. So you could say the same thing about China and that they're engaged in a proxy war with us. So if they're engaged in a proxy war with us, are we not at war with them? Right? The Biden administration was like at war with Russia. They had that was their whole perspective. America and people weren't really behind that. But yeah, my point is we're going to be going through other countries. We're not going to be in a direct conflict with China, but we'll just be battling it out through Maduro and Venezuela. Sheila the Pooh, 1,000,000 hugs to you. Thank you, Sheila. CC gifted a membo. Christopher Harriman Sr. coming in. We got Tyrannus Cygnus in the house. Salty, No More Me. Vintage Mama. We got William Holiday, Nightmare, Skipping Stones Z, Scott, all gifted membos, courtesy of Sheila Pooh. 1,000,000 hugs to you. Thank you, Sheila, for that. Hey, what's up? One old guy's opinion is here. Says Boasberg is the craziest-eyed Skeletor, inferior Article 3 judge in a black robe taking over Article 2. He is also becoming a SCOTUS judge because he thinks he is fine, or the all-father of the District of DC, Asgard, with his pantheon. There's a lot there, one old guy. But yeah, he thinks he's in control of the country, and in some ways he's running it, at least when it comes to these deportations. Hey, Sheila Pooh says, hello, fam, and welcome new membos. Thank you, Sheila, for bringing 10 of them in. Says, don't forget to like this, share this, gift some membos if you can, and subscribe if you can. God bless America and hearts. Thank you, Sheila, for bringing in 10 new friends and for the nice dono. We love you, Sheila. Thank you for those. Wood Spirit says, explain Senate can defund the district with 51 votes. Yeah, I mean, I think you could modify the jurisdiction of Congress, of the courts, although the courts don't care. They already don't have jurisdiction. It's habeas in Texas, but they took jurisdiction anyways. So the next action would just be to defund them or to divest DC of a district. But they won't do that because they're just Congress people. They don't do anything. Mrs. T. Rush says, please explain to me why the president is even answering these rogue judges. He's the president. They don't have authority over that office. Why doesn't the White House tell them to pound sand? Yeah. Yeah, Don. Actually, Don is a great answer, right? He's respecting the system as to not appear to be a dictator. President is a leader. He's answerable to the Constitution. Yeah, it's just, I think it's political compliance with the system. Trump is not a dictator, right? He's not somebody, they like to claim that, but he's never flouted the courts. He showed up, got his mugshot. He showed up to be sentenced. I mean, he's done, or, appeared virtually to be sentenced. Like, he complies with the courts. So he's showing them due respect. I understand the frustration out there, Mrs. T. Rush, believe me. But think about it politically. So let's say Trump ignores all these constitutional orders, or these unconstitutional orders, and the Supreme Court doesn't give him the legitimacy and stamp off on it. They'll call for an impeachment, right? And you might have some very skittish American public who joins in on that call. And so I think it's a political mechanism as well as anything. Knox, TGIF all. Amen, Knox says, I'm sure all the death row inmates waiting to have their habeas petitions heard are all happy to step aside and let all these TROs jump the line. Yeah, so Knox is saying, Knox is a defense attorney in Texas, saying it's weird she's got people on habeas who are just ignored now because somebody just filed a lawsuit in D.C. and now Boasberg took control. Knox says, oh yeah, Venezuelan media says that the country has eliminated TDA, and that is why they were not initially accepting deportees. They could not be gang members as the gang no longer existed. Yeah, all these people are now suddenly innocent. No, I'm just a gardener now. Like, what? Interesting. Doan, what are your odds that SCOTUS folds on the AEA? You mean folds and not accept it? Gosh, I don't know. 50-50? Yeah, it's 50-50 at this point. They've rejected a bunch of them. I mean, this is a ripe case. I think if they're going to take a case, this is a politically palatable case. Remember, the Supreme Court is always looking for like the best case to solve these issues. So if they're going to come out and issue a blanket rule against nationwide injunctions or jurisdiction, like, this is an easy one. They could just say, you can't certify a class. Like, they could split it. Okay, you can't certify a class the way you did, so the injunction applies as to those 5, but Trump can continue to deport the other people. And, they could grant a limited stay as to only a portion of it. But it's a in other words, I don't know what folds means specifically, but are they going to grant solve this nationwide injunction problem right here, right now? I don't think so. I'd say that's probably a low odds. They'll probably just try to piecemeal these things together for a while. So that's the thought. Eileen Kyle, what's up? Thank you for becoming a member, Eileen. We'll see you tomorrow on the members only stream, and grab the stream from this morning. One old guy's opinion says, Boasberg using something for the case? Well, I don't know. Waldo's here. What's up, Waldo? The Salty Lima got a membo. Thank you, Waldo, for bringing in 5 new friends. Michael Shannon is here. Holy Warriors, welcome. Jamie, Heather, JD in the house. JD. We got Backsplash on the balls. Oh, man. Yeah, it's not good. Not good when that happens. One old guy, thank you for bringing in new friends, Waldo. And what a name that was. One old guy's opinions says Skeletor Boasberg with eggplant face. Yeah. Knox Bierman says all of my U.S. citizen gangbangers feel slighted and they want reparations. Yeah. They're like, hey, why are these terrorists getting better rights than us? This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Mrs. T. Rush says, excuse me, but non-citizens are not entitled to due process, period. Due process is specifically for citizens, from Mrs. T. Rush. You want some process, right? I understand you're like, this is a perspective, but we don't just shoot people, for example. Oh, Tren de Aragua, and you're dead. Like, we don't just shoot people, right? Everybody gets some process, but what level of process is the question? And this judge wants due process individually, like with judicial hearings, and that's not what we're talking about. Will Crump says, what happens to Article 2 if SCOTUS upholds even one of these TROs? Or preliminary injunctions against Trump? Would SCOTUS allow Article 2 to burn? Maybe. Yeah, it depends on what they hold it up again. Like, if they say that Trump can't deport terrorists anymore, that's a pretty big infringement on Article 2. That shapes a lot of different things. This old guy says, over on Locals, says, okay, so the original 5 TDA claimants were effectively arguing that they were not members of the class, right? I mean, the class would have been the people that Trump proclaimed to be Tren de Aragua. They said, we're not a member of that class, but the judge certified a class for people who are labeled under the proclamation and said that they're representative of that class, even though they're disclaiming that class. Boasberg is a complete idiot. No wonder the whole Russiagate thing he was involved in as a FISA judge was so totally screwed up. Boasberg is unqualified as a jurist. He's just, he's qualified for the DC circuit, right? They're all cut from the same cloth. Thank you for the dono, this old guy. David Dehart over on YouTube says, I don't think Graham will win again. When Dems play all the stupid things he said until the last Ukrainian, U.S. hasn't lost any soldiers there, best deal we've ever made. Yeah. And he also has said stuff like the abortion stuff, right? Like we need a national amendment on for abortion and all that. Like right at the worst time. He'll win because he's just ensconced in power there, I think. But yeah, not a huge fan of Lindsay. Doan says SCOTUS is poised to destroy the executive branch. We sure hope not. Enlightenment. What's up, Enlightenment? Thank you for becoming a supporter, my friend. We'll see you in the morning. Grab this morning stream. One old guy says, Nathan's hot dog walks bow-legged because of Fani's abuse. Ugh, gross. Hey, Doan. Funny how McAfee got braver after his reelection. Yeah. Scott McAfee, the judge in Georgia, who totally weenied out because he was up for reelection. Clark Blount. What's up, Clark? Thank you, Clark B, for becoming a supporter. We'll see you in the morning. Here's one for Mr. Pastelio. Well, what if I'm taken by mistake instead of a neighbor? My due process is then in habeas, but I don't know how to file that. Would I have access to a lawyer? What wasn't an issue in the appellate court was that some people didn't have enough time to file. Yeah, that was an issue. Yeah, they did say that there was not enough time for them to file, but I think that's kind of a misnomer because they did file. Like they filed before the proclamation was even issued, right? So I would like to know some details on this, Mr. Bastillo, to be clear about it. I would like to know like what the process is. In the filing we read to the Supreme Court, they talked about their rigorous process. I'd like to know what it is, just to be clear. And I'm okay with some process, but not what the judge was saying, right? That you have to have a judicial hearing and all this, like, because that turns into a full thing. Like, if there's just somebody checking and if you have a claim, right, it would be like if you got arrested for a DUI, if you're out in Old Town or something, right? You call somebody, I've been arrested. Can you help me? Yeah, here's where I'm going to be. Here's where I'm going. Like this is not something that is unusual in America. This happens all the time. I have represented many people in this situation. Hey, Rob, it's 2 a.m. My husband just got arrested. What can you do with me? Then I spend, right, the next, and these can be very chaotic situations, especially if it's a serious crime, where they're going to be arraigned in front of a judge in a matter of hours, right? I've done like early morning or late night appearances at 4th Avenue Jail in Phoenix when they were doing arraignments down there to arraign people. You call a lawyer, hey, where's my husband at? And then I spend the night calling around, calling the jails, calling the sheriff. Where did he get arrested? Where is he being held now? Where is he being transported? What time is he appearing in front of a judge? All that stuff. So like, yeah, got to find, or you just, figure it out on your own. And you're there, you get arraigned and you come out of it. And they would assign you a public defender if you're a citizen there. But if you're not a citizen, should they assign you a public defender? Or should somebody just say, okay, well, looks like you're not a citizen. We got some pretty good probable cause and evidence about that you shouldn't be here. We're very clear on that. And we reviewed this. Maybe somebody else looks at some paperwork. Do you have anything to say? Okay, you got no other evidence to show otherwise. Okay, great. So now you're going out of the country because you have no reasonable basis to be here. And you can file your claims there. File your petitions there. Go back to your home country and file it there. I don't know what's so complicated about this, because if I'm in another country illegally and they deport my ass out of the country, I'm not going to be sitting there. Oh, I can't believe they did that to me. I was selling drugs in their country. Of course they're going to throw me out. I would expect that to happen. And I can, if I think that there's some, I do think there should be some process, which is why I was saying you don't just, round people up and execute them. But at the same time, this happens every day. People are arrested every day and their families can't find them. They have no idea where they're going. It's a total mess. Many of them are housed and taken in custody, not released without bond. Families have no idea where they are. So it's just a part of the legal system. And we don't need to coddle gangbangers who are trying to break the law, violating the law to gain a benefit. And again, if one citizen, just to be clear, if one U.S. citizen shows up in an El Salvadorian gang facility, that's going to be a giant problem, just to be clear. This whole program might come crashing down. So I would imagine they've got some pretty good redundancies to protect that from happening. But I'm with you. I don't want unlawful arrest. I don't want innocent people going to jail at all. So some process to weed some of that stuff out. Otherwise, as JC Steak says, enjoy your vacation. Rob, what's up? I still wonder if Fani's daughter, and by the way, look, it would be nice if our immigration system wasn't so broken that we didn't have to operate with this much quickness and haste. But they invaded our country to the tune of 15 to 20 million people. They caused this problem. Now they can't say, well, how dare you try to remedy this problem? No. Get out. Rob says, I still wonder if Fani's daughter is Nathan's daughter. Oh, he's just a friend that I, intercourse with all the time. He comes over even when my daughter is driving drunk and is pulled over. Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if Fani's actually had any babies. So, Fani has had babies. Nathan has had babies. Are you saying, I see what you're saying. So Fani's babies are Nathan's babies? Interesting. Flipping through. What's up, Flipping Through? Glad you flipped through to this channel. Appreciate you becoming a membo. Angela Phelan in the house. Fayin in the house. Thank you, Angela, for sending in a nice donut today. We got David Dehart says, the Fani package sounds like the woman just arrested for planting something on her desk. Is that what happened? It was like a noose on her desk. It was a racist thing? What? It sounded like cocaine to me. Deplorable One says, does Fani Willis think she's above and beyond the court system? Yeah, she is. She has no repercussion. Well, there was repercussions now. But she stayed on the case until the Court of Appeals had to boot her off. Like she's the president? She's not even the AG of Georgia. Yeah, I mean, she got reelected. So people in Georgia are fine with whatever she's doing, indicting her lover. Chat with me says, a part of me wonders if Fani and Nathan went to the non-extradition country from the airport, but she is so sure of herself, I doubt it. Yeah, they're setting up shop over there to flee the country in case they need to. Voice of the People, hey, over at Off Label Podcast, man, awesome stuff, says, one more time so everyone can see it. Thanks for helping Off Label break 1K yesterday. You all are awesome, and you even made Davey emotional. So go check it out if you want to see a cool moment. Voice of the People, Off Label Podcast. Thanks for getting them over the 1K mark. Keep up the great streaming, and we'll see you out there. Doan, what's up, Doan? Says, so today happens to be Respect Your Cat Day. All right. We observe it. Respect Your Cat Day. Don't have any cats here, but we reserve it for all the cats out there in the world. We respect cats. It is dedicated to celebrating companionship of our feline friends. Beautiful. What a beautiful day. True KD says, I'm over these rogue judges, Rob. Shaking my head. I know, True KD. I know. They're frustrating. We're going to hang through. I honestly think today we saw a good one. There was another one today. We'll cover tomorrow on the Membo stream and put a segment out on it. But the Fourth Circuit also came out with another victory. These rogue judges, they're just acting like spoiled little brats right now. But, they always they're just desserts in time. Thank you, True KD. What's up? Number one, deplorable. Can Congress relocate specific judges to certain locations? If so, send them to the most uncomfortable districts you possibly can for them. Yeah, you mean like open up the new district in Greenland kind of a thing? Yeah. Just close the DC circuit, send them up to Greenland, and they can govern there. And I think if Congress made a substantive change like that, they could, but they won't. One old guy says, we have military advisors in UKR, says Russian intel knows that they are acting like the advisors did in Vietnam before the military escalation in 1964. History repeats itself unless someone learns the lessons of history. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's not like we don't have Americans in Ukraine. They're just not on the front lines, allegedly shooting at Russians. But they're providing the support and the resources. It's a proxy war. And it's not good. Yeah, it's not good. One old guy's opinion. Hopefully they solve that. Bucko, what's up, Bucko? Thank you for becoming a member. We'll see you tomorrow morning on the Saturday Membo stream. We also had this one from Deplorable. Says, Congress better think real hard about what this may do to future presidents if this holds up and Congress makes laws. That's exactly right. And that's why the Supreme Court, I think, thinks beyond the current environment, beyond the current context. Like, even if Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts have a disdain for Trump, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. But even if they did, they have to think, like, Trump's not going to be there in 4 years. So they have to think about the executive branch and the future of the country. And if they're responsible for the whittling down of the Constitution, right, that's on their watch. And they think about that. Like, they think about their legacy, right? John Roberts in particular. So, Bucko, thank you for that. What's going on? Deplorable says, Congress better think real hard about this. One old guy says, everyone is given their Miranda rights in Spanish. They're told about the administrative and criminal proceedings. They were not 1325 illegal aliens. They were 1326 felon illegal aliens. Please go over the laws, Rob. Well, I don't know exactly what the process is that they are putting them through, right? They put in their filing that they have a rigorous process, but I don't know what that is. I'd like to see it. Is it like 2 people look at it? Do 2 people turn their keys before they get deported? Is it 1 guy? Is it a DoorDash Uber app like they were using when they tried to invade them into our country, just kind of bringing them in one right after another? What was the process? Don't know. Doan says, how is habeas invoked for merit but ignored on the overriding issue of jurisdiction? Eating your cake and then having it too, says Doan. Yeah, that's right. And then the judge is like, if you bring habeas here, I have to dismiss the whole thing. So strip out the habeas portion of your claim so that the rest of it can survive. And they did that because it's like judicial collusion. He's writing the ruling that they want and guiding him to it. S. Quinn says, it's a Friday, ending the week, shining that big, beautiful spotlight on the biggest Fani in Georgia. It's true. She's Fani Willis. She's the elected DA of Fulton County, giant county there. Biggest Fani in all of Georgia. Show me a bigger Fani than Fani Willis. You can't. Even walking around the airport, even people were recording her. There's Fani. There's Fani. You could see, there's Fani. I could see her a mile away. She's at Terminal 1. I'm at Terminal 37, but I can see Fani. So you just can't miss her. Thank you, S. Quinn. One old guy's opinion says, I am Hispanic and I was a Border Patrol agent years ago. I am very familiar with the deportation process. That's amazing, one old guy. Thanks for securing our border. However, I don't know what this current process is. And I'm not sure that this is a standard process that you may be familiar with. If it is, I might be wrong. But I don't know what they did for this Tren de Aragua gang because they did it under the proclamation that was just recently issued. So I'm sure there's a new procedure with that. That's all I was saying. Tony Hay Munkets. What's up, Tony Hay? Thank you, Tony Hay. 5 membos. You rock. We love you, Tony Hay. Bringing in 5 new membos here. Charles Stanley. You are Ray. You're Ray. We got Aquino. We got Dios Candelaria. Some guy from Africa also joining up. Thanks to Tony Hay Munkets. Tony Hay Munkets. You rock. We got C. John. Whoa. C. John. 25 months as a membo. Thank you, C. John. And C. John also brought in 20 gifted membos. C. John, thank you for doing that, for bringing in 20 new amazing friends. And let's see. I think we just saw some of these folks. Yeah, here we go. We got some names here. So let's see who's coming in. Gifted membos. We got a bunch of them. What's going on? Okay, we got Dawn, Frankie, Tuffy, Virtual Loner. Welcome. Jiff is here. Stinky Bat, Mystic Gypsy. We got Chris is here. Ronnie, Jason, William Terrell. We got Doan Burrill. Oh, here we go. Just clipping them for us. In the house, Don Bardwell, Glyph, Tuffy. We got Virtual Loner. Naming them out. Thank you, Donut, for clipping them for us. And C. John, thanks for bringing them in. We got F. Huber, Kevin Gunderson. And I think we got him named off. Thank you for that, Donut, for clipping for us. Let's see. We got some more coming in here. We got this one from Boopsy. Rob, I love your show. Boopsy, we love you being here. Says, you are brilliant. You don't cuss hardly at all, and you have a great personality. Well, I can attribute that to my mother, all of it, especially the cussing part, because she said she'd wash my mouth out with soap when I was a boy. And sometimes we have to say the A word or the B word, but we try to keep it family friendly here because, you know, this is a family show. We've got business to attend to. We have to educate the youth of America, too. Thank you, Boopsy, for being here. Thanks for being a great member and for always coming in and bringing in your glow and your charm, and your contributions are always amazing and fun. So thank you, Boopsy, for that. And C. John, look at all these membos coming in. Kevin, F. Huber, Jana, Tectonic Edge. What's up, Scott Clements? Good to see you. Chris in here. Good to see you, Chris. Stinky Bat. And thank you, C. John, for bringing in all these people. Jesse, Prince, Michael, Virtual Owner, Tuffy. All gifted membos. Courtesy of C. John. We're going to see a lot of new friends tomorrow on the Saturday stream. We're looking forward to it. All right, let's say hello to some friends on X. And then we're going to wrap it up on the day and go over to locals. We're going to do a members only after party debrief, hang out, chat for a little bit, and see what's cooking over there. Elliot, hey, my friends, make sure you're following Elliot over also on X. He's got a great Substack too. Elliot sharing a couple links from Jonathan Turley and another decision, which is, I think, probably the Fourth Circuit case. James Pepper, what's up? What's up, Mini Tika? Thanks for sharing our links over on Rumble. We appreciate that. And yeah, Free Thinking Latina is here. Says, just saying, there is some resemblance there. There is some resemblance there, and they're about the same height. What's up, Benny Truth? We got Manny out of Manny. Says, maybe that was baby powder for that big fanny. Oh, gosh, maybe. You never know. Sergeant DC, what's up? Says, pretty much everything here on out hinges on this SCOTUS case. If Robertson Barrett sides with the Dems, Trump will have to declare the judge's ruling unconstitutional and ignore them. Otherwise, they're going to ruin our country. Christopher says, it got to the Supreme Court. You still got Roberts and Amy. So we don't know. They're not constitutionalists. They're both squishy. They are very squishy. Hey, what's up? Tiba Rama says, Lido official, the Venezuelan TikToker who told illegals to squat in our homes had to be separated with special protection from his fellow deportees. Interesting stuff. All right, so great comments on X, my friends. James Pepper, Trump should have built fences around the Supreme Court, and then they can deal with the terrorists right inside there. Elliot's in the house, sharing us some links. Yep, another Fourth Circuit case. Big news on that one, too. So we'll get to that one as well. My friends, thanks for following us over on X. Thanks for following other watchers over on X and supporting us. Hey, what's going on? Pinochet on Rumble said, hey, Rob, overseas we had a system called Bats and Hide. Those who got caught or sought asylum, I believe, had a deep biometrics recording similar. A deep biometrics recording similar from Pinochet's helicopter tours. Very interesting, Pinochet. And my friends, thank you for sending those in. Thanks for supporting our work. Thanks for being membos. Thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing and inviting a friend or family member to come over and join us. And you can tell them I made you do it aggressively. But we are going to pause there for the week. It has been a very busy week, and we're always excited to go through it together with you. We're paused for a few short days. Members, we will be back tomorrow on Saturday for the Saturday show, but we will unplug for the weekend. We want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths who mod the fort down for us and keep things nice and orderly around here. K Bean in the house. Donut, mind me. We got Carrie B playing hooky, Dog Digger and Janik, our meme smith, Geegum Geegum, our Doc Master Elliot you just saw on X, and Just Rhonda, our purveyor of fine emojis. Keeping everything here nice and beautiful, but my friends, we will unplug for the weekend. We'll pause for a few short days. We'll get outside. We'll get some fresh air. We'll focus on rejuvenation and restoration and rehabilitation so that when we come back on Monday, we are restored and ready to go. And in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful weekend, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here on Monday. Bye-bye.